Welcome to the Florida Horse Podcast, brought to you by the Florida Thoroughbred Breeders and Owners Association. I'm Tammy Gantt, and I'm joined today by Kathleen O Connell, who recently hosted a brunch and spoke about her life as one of the winningest female trainers of all time in thoroughbred history in America. She is also the most highly decorated Florida trainer in the history of Florida-bred racing, with 18 honors to her credit. We are very proud of Kathleen O'Connell, and today we welcome her here to our podcast from the Brunch Lunch.
I love Florida. I came to Florida in the 70s. It's a very small world because I ended up, my very first place was at Sugar Hill Farm where Tisa Armstrong's father was. So you talk about a small world. That was my very first job. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan, as most people know. I'm original Motown madwoman. So it's nice to be a Florida transplant because I've spent a lot of years down here, and I do love Florida. But it's been a long time, and like I say, everybody starts out someplace. I started out right here in Ocala. So I'm just happy to be a semi-part of the community anyway. And I've been a big supporter of all the Florida-breds, of course, and had an honor to train for a lot of people because I've been at it a lot of years with the Florida-breds, and that's why I've had so much success. I think Florida has a great product. We just have to get it out there to shine even more. There's a lot that, involved in the industry. A lot of people. It's a great big team to make it all go, from the farms to the feeding to the supplies to everything. It certainly supports a huge bunch of people. So we really need to focus on keeping that in mind because that is a big part of the future.
So tell me about your childhood. How did you ever meet a horse or get involved with horses?
Well, my dad was a Detroit policeman for 25 years, so we weren't really meeting horses there. But I was always crazy about horses, and he did have a police friend that had a place out in the country, and their daughter was my age and very involved in 4-H. So it just kind of grew and got crazy from there. And most people that know anything about me know that I spent at least 8 or 10 years in 4-H. Michigan had a great veterinarian program. I graduated from school with a 3.8 National Honor Society. Thought for sure I would get in the Michigan College of Veterinarian Science, and I was rejected because at the time they only took 2 women a year, and you had to have a 4.0 average. So I did go to community college for a while because they said, oh, well, take classes and apply again. And I just woke up one day and I said, I hate my job. I hate going to school. I hate everything. I'm going to go back to the horses until I figure out what I want to do, and I'm still trying to figure it out. It's really hard to define just one moment or one race or one anything because it's been a whole complete journey of getting there. I would say one of the ones that was the most heartworthy was the Tampa Bay Derby because it was for the Mr. and Mrs. Campbell, who I trained for years. It was a horse they bred. I've been at Tampa Bay Downs every year since 1976. I galloped horses the first 10 or 11 years I was there, but I spent a lot of time there. And of course, Lady Shipman in the Breeders' Cup, even though she ran second, was huge because back in the day when Lady Shipman competed, they didn't have a class for a turf sprint. They didn't have a class for 3-year-old fillies. So here she is as a 3-year-old filly competing against some of the best older males in the world going 5/8 of a mile. So to me, that was huge.
Thinking about Tampa Bay Downs and that, what joy does that experience of being at Tampa Bay Downs bring to you? And how does it differ maybe from other places you've been?
Well, if any of you people have been at Tampa Bay Downs, it still has the old field track. And they've got really nice boxes outside. They have a good quality of racing. They put in the turf course, which is outstandingly one of the best there is. And it's just, it's big enough to accommodate everybody, but it's small enough to really be good for the people. You're right on top of the action pretty much no matter where you sit. And it's just a good experience. It really is. You can get to the paddock, to your seats, to the bedding. It's a very fan-friendly place is what I would call it, fan-friendly. And, you know, it was Florida Downs, it was Sunshine Park, and then it was Tampa Bay Downs. I was lucky enough to be galloping when George Steinbrenner and Sam Davis had horses there. It's got a lot of history.
So I know that you didn't get to vet school, and I know that your parents, I have seen them at so many of our galas. And so how did they inspire you, and how did they help you develop your work ethic that you have? Because I know your day starts early, your day ends late. You want to talk a little bit about that?
My dad was a good inspiration. He was a very hardworking person. He had 2 jobs. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and he said, no matter what you do, just do it good. Be the best. Be the best. Whether you're mopping floors, cutting grass, working at McDonald's, just be the best. And he said the rest will follow, and it does. And I think everything needs a good foundation, whether it's horses, people, a business, or anything else. Everything needs a good foundation. And I was lucky enough to get one. And I was lucky enough to end up like at Sugar Hill Farm. You know, back in the day, we didn't have internet, we didn't have anything. I mean, my life could have turned out a lot different. And I remember her father was such an inspiration. He was leading 2-year-old rider in the nation. And when I came down to their farm, I had broke horses. I had worked in 4-H, I had showed horses, but I actually never galloped a racehorse. But I thought, geez, breaking race horses to go in a circus? How easy is that? That's not like the show horses where you're doing serpentines and flying lead changes and everything. And I remember, you know, Sherman taught me everything. He taught me how to tie my knot and everything, and I still tie it like a left-handed person. I'm not left-handed, but he was left-handed, you know? And he always said, when I left the farm, I said, Sherman, how can I ever thank you? And he said, just help somebody along the way. He said, a lot of people don't need money, or if they need a few bucks, he said, but just help them along the way. Sometimes just a smile, sometimes taking 5 minutes to talk to somebody, because he said everybody needs some help, and it's true. And I think a lot of focus nowadays is lost because everybody's on their phone playing. Nobody talks to people like they do. They don't interact. I don't think kids learn how to interact. I was out with some owners the other night. We're all sitting eating dinner, and the one guy calls the guy at the end of the table, and he said, is this how we're going to have to talk tonight? Because he was on his phone so much.
So I know you've met a lot of people that were role models as trainers and people in the industry. So what would be a couple words of wisdom that someone gave you that stuck with you that you really think pushed and propelled you forward?
It's just always doing the best that you can. You know, with the horses, whether it's training or galloping or whatever, you know, you have to have a plan B because sometimes plan A doesn't work out. So, and, you know, the horses, they're, you know, it's like a deck of cards. You get dealt these cards, you try and play and do the best you can with them. You know, you're not going to make them run any faster than their God-given ability, but maybe you can see things that's going to help them make more comfortable. Maybe they need a equipment adjustment. Maybe they need less training. Maybe they need more training. You know, maybe they need more feed. Maybe they need less feed. But it's always observing and trying to find the best fit.
So I used to know some of your grooms down at Calder Race Course, and I noticed they were very, very attention to detail in their job. So when you say hands-on and you go to look at the horses, what are a couple things that you look at the first thing and say, this is really important for me to see because I'm here in person?
Well, it's all really important. I'm kind of anal about records, so we have daily feed reports that come to me every day. I make out the training schedule every day and backs up to both places. Modern technology has gotten things a lot easier as far as if they want me to see something, they can video or send it, which, when I went to work for Mr. and Mrs. Campbell, we didn't even have a cell phone. We had the beeper, so somebody would beep you with a number and you'd run to the phone and try and, answer their call or pay phones, which half the people nowadays wouldn't even think exist. It's everything's come a long way. When I came on the track, the phone booths used to get locked at DRC. When the races started, the phone booths would get locked so that there was no outside betting and so on. Now you can sit at home and bet on your phone.
So when you think about the different years, was there ever a year that was more challenging than others? And then how did you overcome that adversity? Like maybe you didn't have as many horses as you had before, or maybe, can you give me an idea what that might have been like?
At the very beginning, Michigan racing was falling apart. So if you notice, when I took my trainer's license out or whatever, the first couple of years were decent for somebody starting out, and then it faded to nothing. In '83 was when I moved to Tampa permanently out of Michigan. Part of it was I finally figured out it never got cold down here or snow. But it's you have to persevere at what you want, but it's always small steps. So, I just had a few horses. I came to Tampa. I had the Tampa type horses, and it wasn't until I was introduced to Mr. and Mrs. Campbell and some other people in Ocala where I actually could say I have 8 horses that I think would fit at Calder that would do, and then it just built from there. But it's hard to go and keep going when this one's got a blown up leg, this one gets sick, this one gets time off, and sometimes it's beyond anyone's control. But, it's just, if you're horse people, perseverance pays. Everybody in this room has been through bad times, good times, whatever. The wheel always turns, sometimes not fast enough, but the wheel always turns if you persevere.
What advice would you give for someone starting out in the business as a new trainer? I know Florida had been really, really great, giving women lots of opportunities back in the 60s and 70s. First person to ride in a parimutuel race was here in our state. And there's been a lot of milestones for women, but not just women and men. What advice would you give for somebody trying to become a trainer in our business today?
Well, first you can't have a life because it's devoted to everything you do. And I'm serious, it's very, very hard to navigate the waters. My hat's off to the women and the men that raise families and have kids and everything, because the horses, as you know, are very time consuming. And it's not any kind of business where you shut the door. It's not the type of business where when you leave and you come back, everything's the same, because it's not. They get sick, they get hurt, they get cast in the stall, they get everything. So a person's got to be willing to devote that time, because it is a very time-constructive thing. It's a great job. It's a job I've not considered a job for years because I've had such a passion for it. But it is time-consuming.
So for those in the back, he was asking what makes the Florida-bred horse special and why she specializes in them.
Well, I think there's a huge focus on Florida-breds here. I think we've learned more feed programs. Fred will tell you over the years, the nutrition, it's like they don't just appear out of nowhere. They're born, they have to be raised right, fed right, vaccinated right, and everything. So, the Florida-breds shine everywhere. They do. For years, when California was more in its heyday, I sold a lot of horses to Doug O'Neill, Peter Miller, a lot of them. They could hardly wait. The Florida-bred that I ran wasn't across the finish line, and they were on the phone saying, we're interested, da-da-da-da-da. So Florida has a great, great product, and it's all the people here that have made it shine.
I think I liked Brock's question because I think he was leading into right now the Florida-breds are leading all states excepting Kentucky in stakes wins. They're at a record pace. They've won more than ever at Saratoga. So Florida-breds definitely have quality. They definitely compete in open company. And I think Brock, if he's hinting one of his stories coming up, is going to have a little bit about that. But you're one of the reasons why, because you have been one of the trainers that has always seen that value in Florida-breds. Any other questions? I see some students back there. I always know they have a question. Yes. Great question. Can you talk about the retiring process for horses and how you prepare them for their second career?
I am very blessed to have very responsible people that I train for, and I am truly blessed with that because I like the happily ever after stories. And I must have claimed 15 brood mares in the last few years that go on to have a great life. I've also had a lot of success working with a lady in Bushnell named Becky Alexander, and she rehomes a lot of horses. Christmas is my best time because I get all these pictures, and it's horses that, you know, they got too old to race, they had some minor problems, or I've had horses that were just slow horses that they broke their maiden and they weren't going to be worth much after that. But I am lucky to be able to train for responsible people. Ring the Bell is another organization I highly promote. When we go to Tampa, which I've been lucky enough to be leading trainer there, all my owners sign up at the beginning, $100 a win to ring the bell. So you need a process afterwards, and I think everybody's working really, really hard for it. Believe me, they can adapt and learn another profession or another career. And it's amazing to see even some of the ones that were maybe a little hard to handle on the track or whatever, that once they get to the farm, they deflate and they love it. Most horses want a job, want some kind of a job. So it works out well when we can provide them with something, you know. And it's just a good feeling as far as the programs that are around.